Now, for
taking
personal
any-
life at this time.
Yeah, this is
Well-
Miriam Hawkins. I see you were
Well, in
engaged
college,
to.
I was never engaged to.
That's
Oh,
what
that's
it's.
newspaper
This is
rubbish.
this is what I got up from
No,
upstairs. Oh,
never
no.
engaged to. But in college, I had a girl all the time I was in college who now lives in Louisville, Kentucky.
And you told us a little bit
about
yeah.
her. And about the about the nightclub, and I tell you about when she had a canoe. And,
Right, yes,
and it
you
was
told
the boy,
about that.
and the boy who danced there was
yes.
now Senator George Murphy.
Yes, right.
And well, after her, there was a girl over whom my partner Donald and I met.
Right, and you
That
went
was
into
an
all
girl.
that.
It was
That's
yes.
a great story. I love that.
And then I began, then with the stars in my eyes, I began meeting these people that meant so much to me as stars. And Miriam, I told you, sailing into the office one day. And the
and
next
going
day
up
I
to
took her
the
to the football
game. We went through that.
And we became very great friends. And
Well, do you wanna-
nobody else very important, just a lot of
Do you want to go into the
strays.
first marriage at all?
Well, just to pass that over quickly, I want to watch the time because I've got to get to the office and
Okay.
get to that lunch. The Sylvia story, that's quite an episode in my life.
Short but important one.
One night, I took a girl to see a show called Bad Girl by Vina Delmar. It had been taken from a novel called Bad Girl, which was an enormous bestseller. Oh, this was a great bestseller. And one of those books that had been turned down by about 10 publishers, and then finally came out and was #1 on the list for months, and was made into a play. Not a very successful play. But I was sitting with this girl in the theater, and the girl who was playing Bad Girl walked out on the stage with a yellow raincoat on. And I remember saying to the girl next to me, "That's the most beautiful girl I ever saw." And I said, "I want to meet her if it's the last thing I do on earth." The girl's name was Sylvia Sidney. And almost immediately after that, she was signed up for movies and went to Hollywood. I had not met her. But by this time, I considered her my personal property, although I'd never met her. And I followed this girl's career in the papers as though she were my sister. I knew what she was up to by reading all the gossip columns and whatnot. Now, directly Sylvia hit Hollywood. She was a girl, to put it mildly, knew what she wanted. And she was going to be a big star in Hollywood. And she set out to enchant the head of the studio that had brought her out there, Paramount Pictures. The head of the studio was a man named Schulberg, Mr. Ben Schulberg, whose son I'll tell you about later. His son was Bud Schulberg, who's What Makes Sammy Run.
Yeah.
I published.
And
But
John's been
this
talking to
this
us about
fits what?
But we'll go into that later.
John what?
My husband.
No, it was
Oh, no, he doesn't make Sammy run. That makes what Johnny can't read. Excuse me, it's
Oh.
one person. But I think that's
yeah,
also you.
yeah.
Go on.
Well, Sylvia broke up the Schulberg household. She thought she was just vamping Mr. Schulberg to help along her career in Hollywood. And it ended up being one of the great love affairs of Hollywood. He fell in love with her. She fell in love with him. He was old enough to be a father. But ugly as sin, but a fascinating man. Fascinating man. And I had never met this girl, but I deeply resented this affair. Absolute outrage to me. Now, I told everybody that I wanted to meet Sylvia Sidney. Anybody that knew us both. And twice dinner dates were arranged. Once with Mr. Lubitsch, Mr. Ernst Lubitsch and his wife had fixed it up that we were going to have a foursome. The day before the dinner, which I was so excited about, I could do no work for about 3 days. She got pneumonia and had to be taken to the hospital for several days. That date was over. Somebody else had arranged a date. She was called back to Hollywood. It was fate. I was never going to meet her. Then came New Year's Eve of the end of 1933, going into 1934. And I had a very, very pair of friends I loved very much named Lynn Farnell and his wife Nell, Farnol. And he was the head of Samuel Goldwyn's publicity department, and a great gentleman, one of the few people Goldwyn never could bully around go and always deeply respected Lynn Farnell. They lived right down the block here on 62nd Street, that little private house. And they had a big New Year's Eve party and invited me to it. And I already had a date with a girl to go to another party, so I had to say no. And about an hour later, I had a telephone call. I didn't tell you this story, did I?
No.
About an hour later, I had a telephone call from a young man named Richard Halliday. Richard Halliday was a star in the story department of Paramount Pictures, now married to Ray Martin. We were quite good friends. And Dick Halliday said, I hear you're not going to the final New Year's Eve party. And I said, how the hell did you hear that? I can't go. I have another date. And he said, you'll be sorry. You know, that singing. And I said, well, I'm sorry, I can't go. He said, you'll be sorry. And I said, oh, what the hell is all this about? He said, I'm bringing Sylvia Sidney. Well.
That clinched it. I can see it now, quickly.
So I said, well, I'll have to see what I can do about that. So I told the girl that I was bringing, whose name I couldn't tell you if my life depended on, that there was some author at this party I had to see for a few minutes, that we would have to, is everything all right?
I think we're going now. Yes, okay. As long as the light's going.
Yeah, so I told this girl we'd have to stop off on the way to the party we were intended to go to for just a little while. And we walked in, and Richard Halliday walked up with this creature that I'd been dreaming about for years. She had on a black evening dress with little stars in it, you know, little silver stars.
You can still remember it.
Yes, of course I could. And I met Sylvia, and the way Halliday introduced us was, Mr. Cerf, this is Mrs. Cerf. That's the way I met Sylvia. Well, by this time, I was quite the young man about town. I was tongue-tied, absolutely tongue-tied. I could not say one word to this girl. I mumbled, glad to meet you, and retreated in confusion. And for 1 hour, I stayed at that party without talking to Sylvia Sidney. And finally, couldn't stand it any longer. And I yelled over to this girl, who was having quite a good time, as I recall. It was a very good party. Don't forget, we've got to go to this other party. We better get going. And I then managed to muster enough courage to go up to Sylvia and say, well, it's been a great pleasure meeting you, Miss Sidney. And Sylvia said, you're the strangest young man I ever met in my life. And I said, why? And she said, well, I've been hearing for about 2 years about this young publisher who was mad for me and had to meet me. And everybody was trying to arrange this. And he said, then I finally meet you, and you never say one word to me. And by this time, I was in control a little bit. I said, well, Miss Sidney, we've been here about an hour. And I said, I've just been so dazzled by you, I couldn't talk. But I said, if you'd like me to tell you every move you've made in this past hour, I can, because I've never taken my eyes off you. And Sylvia said, don't you think I know that? Well, and then she said, I'm with old Halliday. Who are you with? And by this time, I was ready to throw my girl out of the window. And I pointed to her, and she said, are you game? And I said, game for what? She said, to go off, leave the party. And I said, you mean you and me? And she said, yes, don't you want to? Well, perfect gentleman, I left word for Halliday to take care of my girl, and we were on our way 10 minutes later. That's how I met Sylvia.
And you married her?
Well, there's a lot of things in between. I won't go into that. That was New Year's Eve. We knew each other quite well until 1st of October. And there were all kinds of things happening. It was very personal, but I was mad for her. And she's a wonderful girl. And as she later said, she said, you never really were in love with me. You were in love with a dream, which was true. And she said, for about 6 months, she said, I was so crazy about you that I lived up to your dream. And she said, I got damn tired of it. But it was true. She said, you never really liked me. It was the dream you loved. And this is very shrewd of her, because I was in love with a dream.
What did your father think of this?
Pop, who adored Miriam, didn't like Sylvia, because Sylvia was a very self-centered girl, driving girl, and she treated Pop very politely. But Miriam was a southern girl who knew how to butter up people, and she would curl up in my Pop's lap, you know, and take him to lunch once in a while. And Pop thought Miriam was something from heaven. He thought Sylvia was a fresh, spoiled brat. But he was very, when I told him we were going to get married, he was very displeased, as were all my friends, since it was a perfectly ridiculous marriage. I was a young publisher. At that time, I was making, I remember, $200 a week, and Sylvia was making $4,000 a week, and she was a big, big star. Now, the picture that really clinched it before I met her, I told you, the American Tragedy played a big part in my life. Miriam played it on the stage, and Sylvia played it in the movie. Isn't that interesting?
It really is.
Yeah. Now, by the time we were married is the time we should have been saying goodbye to each other. And I had some crazy idea that this was going to solidify a relationship that obviously was slipping. And Sylvia still cared enough about me at that time to say yes. We have often since said what fools the two of us were. She was being nice to me, and I was trying to hang on to some kind of a dream that was already shattered. So the marriage lasted less than a year. But I regard it as one of the most wonderful episodes of my life. I have nothing but admiration and friendship for Sylvia. That does not go for Phyllis, who didn't know her, but is always like most wives who love their husbands, resent people who were important in their lives before they came along.
Well, do you think you learned from that, though? I mean, you're very happily married for a long time now, and I mean, you must have learned.
Phyllis is my girl. Phyllis is my wife. Sylvia was a wild adventure, a dream, and something that should happen to everybody in his lifetime. And I thank God that it happened to me, because it was a wonderful episode. The only bad part of being married to a girl like Sylvia and having it end is you can't forget it very quickly.
Nobody lets you.
Well, no, it isn't only that. It's you know, when I still had her, I was full of Sylvia and couldn't get her out of my mind. I'd temporarily forget her. I'd turn a corner and see a flag in front of the Paramount Theater, 3 stories high, Sylvia Sidney. Or open the paper and see a great big picture of her, looking absolutely beautiful in some new picture she was doing. Or I'd read any item about myself. For 3 years after the marriage, I was always Bennett Cerf, ex-husband of Sylvia Sidney, which used to drive me absolutely crazy. And to round up this episode, gradually it disappeared, and my memory of her disappeared too, the poignant memories, the ones that hurt. And I think a person can tell when they're over this kind of an affair is for a long while these thoughts come unbidden into your head to haunt you. Every places you've been together, when you see them, so many memories come rushing back. But there comes a moment when you are cured but don't want to admit it to yourself, and you deliberately dredge up these memories. They no longer come unbidden, but you say, I guess I'll suffer a little bit. You start thinking about it. And it's like putting a record on the Victrola. You say, I guess I'll now suffer through the night we did this together. But now it's not involuntary. It's something that you do yourself. And I know myself so awfully well that I soon caught myself doing this. And I said, why, you have this self-pity that you're immolated in, you bastard. You're doing this just to play games with yourself. And then I was completely cured, completely and utterly cured. But for a little while, it was, I think my pride was hurt at the whole thing. Sylvia's too. Everybody talked about this great, wonderful romance between the young publisher, you know, and the budding young star. There were articles in all the motion picture magazines. We were glamorized. And to have it end so quickly was,
well,
we're both embarrassed.
Was her career really, did she feel that was most important?
Well,
I mean,
what I realized it was what really started the downward slant. We were married in Phoenix, Arizona. I flew to Phoenix and from New York, and she flew from Hollywood. That was the usual 50-50 arrangement, you know. And we were married by a Supreme Court judge, and he was in the middle of a murder case, and we hadn't made any arrangements. This is the way Sylvia and I had our whole life was. I got to Phoenix, she got to Phoenix, but it never occurred to us we had to have somebody to marry us. So I had to go down to the courthouse to dig up somebody to marry us. And I asked who the head judge was, the head of the court there, and they told me his name, and I said, do you think you'd have time to do a little marriage ceremony? And they said, oh, he's in the middle of a murder case. You'll have to get somebody else. I said, well, that's too bad. Maybe he'll recommend somebody. But I said, my name is Bennett Cerf, and I'm marrying a girl named Sylvia Sidney. Well, in 5 minutes, the murder case had been adjourned. and the judge was with me to come over to the hotel in Marius. We couldn't get rid of him. Kept reminding me he had a murder case. But then.
Well, then did she go back to Hollywood? And
well, we both went to Hollywood together. There were a lot of parties for us. And we were going to come back on a boat that went through the Panama Canal, went down the coast of Mexico, through the Panama Canal, and up to New York. It was a regular service that was a 2-week trip. We thought that'd be wonderful as a honeymoon, ha-ha. But then there were going to be a lot of parties for New York. Well, I'd been there for about 3 days when Sylvia's producer, Mr. Walter Wanger, had lunch with me one day and said, "Do you know what Sylvia's giving up for you?" He said, "I'm about to do the first outdoor Technicolor picture." And he said, "It is made to order for Sylvia, and she'd love to do it. But," she said, "she wouldn't do that to you because all these plans are made. So she's losing what will be the most important part, a role in her career." And I said, "Well, that's too damn bad about her. Well, she's already a big star. She'll find some other picture." He said, "I know, but this is a wonderful one. It's called The Trail of the Lonesome Pine." And he said, "Sylvia is made to order for this, and it's an all-star cast. And she is so perfect for it." He said, "I persuaded her to try on a couple of the costumes." And he said, "I just want to show you the shots that we made of this girl of yours in the costumes for The Trail of the Lonesome Pine." So by this time, some deep suspicions were growing in my mind. We went into the little projection room, and they were the shots made up at Lake Arrowhead, this whole set with the mill and the cabins. And Sylvia, with 3 or 4 costumes on, it was obvious that she had been completely costumed for this picture. She looked glorious. And Walter said, "Why don't you let her do it? You can have those." He said, "After all, you know each other pretty well." He said, "This is all this honeymoon stuff. You can do that anytime." And he said, "If you want to stay out, why don't you come up to Arrowhead for a week or so, and Sylvia will be with you every night." I said, "Oh, I'm going to be Mr. Sylvia Sidney. Great, while she's making a picture." Well, I got home and said to Sylvia, "This has all been cooked up behind my back, hasn't it?" She said, "No, it hasn't." She said, "I tell you now, if you say I should come with you on the boat, I will come." I said, "You're really dying to make this picture?" She said, "I'm dying to." I said, "Well, what the hell can I say?" So I came back to New York alone in the plane, and Sylvia went and made The Trail of Lonesome Pine. And on that plane coming home, I remember saying to myself, how much more of this can I take? I'm much too proud a young man and too arrogant. I am not cut out to be the husband of a movie star. Sylvia's behavior was absolutely in keeping with her whole character and that of a star. A star has to put her career first. Husband comes second. And she was acting in complete consonance with her beliefs and with what I knew about her. I shouldn't have been surprised. In fact, I was very lucky to find out how ridiculous all the dream was. The idea was she was going to spend 6 months in New York with me and then play for 6 months. I didn't want her to give up her career. I was proud of her being a big star. But here I came back with my tail between my legs, canceled all the parties. And I knew then the whole marriage. All my friends had told me they had a committee to save me from Sylvia. Not that they didn't like Sylvia, but I can still remember the committee, how outraged I was by the committee. She was a pretty snooty little girl. I took her down to the Harrimans for a party down Long Island. And she was going to show these people of society that she wasn't impressed by them. And by the same token, they were showing her they weren't impressed with her. It was a disaster, the party, the weekend. Plus the fact that a couple of well-known associates made slight pisses at her when I wasn't looking at her.
Well, that always adds to the story. That's all.
She told me that in great triumph. She had these bastard friends of yours. Yeah.
Was she interested in publishing at all? I mean.
Oh, you bet she was. Oh, Sylvia's a very smart girl. And very interested politically, and she's a great. I still think
she's still around. I mean,
yeah, she was last year. She was in. She played in Enter Laughing on Broadway, and she was in Barefoot in the Park for a while. I think. I think so for a while this year. But she's in television every once in a while. Of course, she's no kid anymore. So.
No. Was she married?
She married after I was her first husband, but then she married later on. She married Luther Adler. And they had a son, who I understand is a very brilliant young scientist today. That didn't last. Then she married again, and the third time she married was very amusing because the man she married the third time had been Phyllis's boss when Phyllis was working at McCann Erickson, the advertising agency. And his name was Carlton Alsop. And it was his notion that it would be very amusing if Phyllis and I would stand up for them when they got married. And I thought this was very funny. I thought Phyllis was going to kill him and me.
I don't blame her. I don't blame her. That's the right attitude. She's got the right attitude.
She couldn't see that this was kind of funny. Well, I've got to run.
Okay.